I'm gonna start it, and because we actually are continuing on the journey of a voice for our rivers. So for those who attended the opening plenary this morning, we started with several stories of rivers. And basically it was around the theme of giving our rivers a voice. We continue that journey, and this time we continue that journey to Asia. So we're talking about Asia's river basins for this session. And you might be surprised why we only have one speaker. We do have two who will be online. But with that then, I have the pleasure of introducing Anoulak Kittikhoun. Anoulak is the Chief Executive Officer of the Mekong River Basin Commission, one of the largest transboundary rivers in Asia, and one which I had the pleasure of visiting just a couple of months ago. So with that, Anoulak, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Yes, so sorry I'm keeping you from lunch, and it feels very lonely up here. So yesterday there was, I think you heard one doomsday scenario for the Mekong. So I come here with a more balanced view and maybe a little bit of hope in terms of where the Mekong future lies. So I'll talk about 17, 18 minutes, and then happy to answer your questions and take your comments and recommendations. So at the Mekong River Commission, we did a projection, right, into 2030, 2040. And a lot of the problems that you have heard in the media about the Mekong are true if nothing or not drastic actions are done about it. So I call that the scenario of the last days of the mighty Mekong, which is a title of a book recently also on the Mekong by one of my good friends. And to avoid that last days, what do we have to do? And that's where we have to go in terms of toward a new days for the mighty Mekong. And I conclude with these four fundamental shifts that needs to be done in order to get there. Right. But first, in the Mekong River Basin, we also have this Mekong State of the Basin monitoring and reporting. We have indicators in the social environment, economic, climate change dimensions. And if you look on the condition of the basin, you see two red dots, right? And that is really in the environmental conditions. With sediment, which you heard about yesterday, it's really in the red, with the substantial reduction in the sediment that is coming through from the basin, and also in the environmental assets. So that's also in red, with our loss of wetlands, biodiversity, hotspot, etc. And if nothing is done about them, you can see that the outlook is very negative. It goes down, right, in these areas. But in other areas, there's good news and bad news. It's a mixed bag. And I will take you to some of this by 2030 or 40. If these conditions or these trends are allowed to progress, what would happen? So in terms of the flow conditions, we have more and more water infrastructure in the basin, right? More dams, more reservoir, more roads, rail, urbanization, industrialization, etc. And this has, of course, very dramatic impact on the river flow or the natural flow regime of the basin. So by 2030, if this is not done anything about it, you will see more and more uncoordinated operation of these water reservoir, infrastructure projects, etc. And that has consequences for rapid water fluctuation, that has consequences in terms of what's coming into the Tonle Sap, what's coming into the delta, into the sea, etc., and risk to the livelihoods, especially for the people who are living downstream of these projects, right? In terms of water quality, the cities in the Mekong are growing fast every day. If you look at Vientiane, Phnom Penh, Can Tho, etc., very rapidly industrialized. So more and more polluted cities in terms of water quality, industrial agriculture pollutant runoff, more and more perhaps water quality related emergencies, right, by 2030. And sediment, you heard the grim picture yesterday, so in our projections it's the same. If nothing is done about this, especially trapping by dams and also sand mining, then up to 97%, right, this is the worst case scenario, will be gone by 2040. And one consequence of that is bank erosion. And to fix that, you may need $6 billion US. Environmental assets, especially wetlands, floodplains, will continue to be lost. More biodiversity hotspot. And associated with that, the number and the quantity and the value of the native fish, which the Mekong, I think, has the largest inland fisheries in the world, will decline by up to 20 to 40% by 2040. But maybe one good news is the non-native fish will go up. So this tilapia and stuff, which tastes really bad compared to Mekong fish. In terms of society, looking into 2040, we'll have 100 million people. From now, about 70 million, right? 100 million people, more and more in urban cities, up to 70%. You will see a shift from agricultural-based livelihoods to more service manufacturing sectors. And of course, poverty may be reduced, but you have inequalities going up, right? Maybe a bit of good news is that access to electricity, we project, would be fuller, so as basic drinking water. And food is generally secure, according to our projection. Economic performance for the past 2 decades, the Mekong countries, this is 5 countries of the ASEAN, right? ASEAN is now the 5th largest economy in the world. So 5 of the countries of ASEAN are in the Mekong, growing up to 8% every year for the past 20 years. But that growth will slow down. But it slowed down for a number of factors. But despite that, Cambodia and Laos would become middle-income countries, along with Thailand and Vietnam. Agriculture share of GDP will decline, but it's still substantial. But the total economic value will increase because of better quality, etc., up to maybe 461 billion by 2040. And you know Thailand and Vietnam are the 2 largest exporters of rice in the world. Energy, we're in Austria, and next to us is Switzerland. So, you are probably a hydropower superpower in Europe. But in the Mekong, energy is projected to grow 2/3 by 2040. And to meet some of that, not all of that, the countries plan more dams. Maybe this is not good news for some of us in the room, but 30 more dams are in the planning stage. Now there's about 100 dams. Just to put in perspective, Switzerland has about, I think, 15,000 installed megawatt capacity, over 200 large dams. So the Mekong is putting in place Switzerland more by 2040. Electricity generation will increase to 131 gigawatt per hour by 2040, and total economic value of all these plants would jump to $70 billion. So that's a substantial economic benefits there. But it comes with a cost, and the cost is I've talked already about sediment, about wetlands, but also fish. Right, so the economic value of the fish, especially native wild fish, will go down as much as $22 billion. Aquaculture will increase. Aquaculture is already predominant in Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam, but not in Cambodia. So Cambodia still relies very much on wild fishery for their food and income. And navigation will go up if you build all the one synergies with these hydropower projects is that it raises the water level up, so navigation would become much more conducive in the Mekong. So that is sort of the big macro picture of things would be possible if business as usual would be the order of the day. So a mix of bad and good news. But how to make the bad news less and maybe more good news. So the Mekong countries last year adopted a new, we think, path-breaking strategy, the Basin Development Strategy 2021-2030. And it has really 5 big priorities. And it's pegged to the UN SDGs, the different targets of the SDGs. And it's really in the environment, for example, they have a vision to maintain the ecological function of the Mekong. Right? They have a vision, priority 2, to enable exclusive access and utilization of water and related resources to all the groups, especially the vulnerable groups. They have a vision to make more of a food, energy, water linkage in terms of economic growth and development, and not sectoral focus. They have also a vision of strengthening the resilience against climate risks, especially floods and droughts, and a new priority really to strengthen basin-wide, meaning Upper Mekong, Lower Mekong, basin-wide cooperation with all the 6 riparian countries. So that is a strategy, and we think that if this strategy is implemented, not only by the Mekong River Commission, but also by all the stakeholders, actors, countries in the region, we will turn the tide. So we will turn the tide from, you see the 4 arrows going down in terms of red, to maybe some of them turning yellow and possibly green. Especially in the water flows fluctuation situation, maybe the flow regime of the nature or the natural period cannot come back, but we can manage them better. The sediment, half of it has been reduced, maybe cannot come back, but we can manage the remaining sediment balance better. Some of the ecological assets we need to restore and manage better. And the native fish protect some of the remaining key ones and increase management of the transboundary areas better. So we think that we can turn the tide from 4 red arrows to a bit more yellow and green, except one, which is the climate change, which is under God's control, and even COP27 cannot do anything about that. So we are also very hopeless in the Mekong. But what do we need to do to turn the tide? So we talk about 4 strategic shifts, which has not been in place before in any strategy of the Mekong River Basin. The first is to really move from reactive regional planning to proactive regional planning. The second is to move from uncoordinated water infrastructure to a more coordinated regime. The third is to move from a fragmented monitoring, modeling, information system to a more modern, fit-for-purpose system. And finally, to move from governing just the Lower Mekong among 4 countries to a basin-wide sort of Lansang Mekong or Upper Mekong, Lower Mekong governance. So what does it mean, proactive regional planning? It's the opposite of reactive regional planning, meaning in reactive planning, you try to catch up with what the countries are planning, right? So they plan projects, they have transboundary impacts, and we come in with mitigation, with technology, etc. You can only do so much. And the problems grows bigger and bigger from a basin-wide point of view. So you need to take the basin from a basin-wide perspective and add in strategically, where are some of the joint investment will go, how do we coordinate the sediment to go down, how do we maintain fish in some areas, how do we develop in some other areas, right? So this is not on a conservation strategy, it's a sustainable development strategy. And from coordinated from uncoordinated to coordinated, we should start to share more and more data, especially from the water infrastructures, from the dams, basically, right? And then from that sharing, maybe go towards more notification, better notification. If they were going to operate their reservoir in an unusual manner, right? If they quick release, quick restriction, etc., there should be a better notification. And then finally, to have a regime in place to coordinate not only optimizing or not only running these reservoirs for energy, but also for flood, for drought, for environment. And from fragmented and outdated monitoring system, we have now started this work on this, and this is why I asked Birgit earlier this morning about the core river monitoring network. So we've got this set up, and it's in sort of 4 disciplines, connecting hydrology, fish, sediment, water quality, and we are able to know in a timely fashion when things change and what is the impact for the environment and the people. And we are making apps, we're making dashboards, we're making more visualization tools to be able to communicate more and more with the youth, with the public, with stakeholders who are not necessarily engineers and experts. And we're moving more and more, building on our relationship with China, with the Lansang Mekong, into a more basin-wide approach for managing the basin. So I'm bringing in different stakeholders, experts, partners, and that's why we spend time also in these kind of conferences to build a coalition, basically, for the Mekong. So that's it. I think if we implement these 4, we believe we can turn the tide, and we need only not the help of the countries, but everyone involved. And I would end with some pictures from our basin. This is starting from the upper part of the lower Mekong basin, just after China. So beautiful Chiang Rai, going down to historical Luang Prabang, going down further to industrializing Phnom Penh, and then further south in Kanter. And then back to the middle of the river where our headquarters sits in charming Vientiane, which is as beautiful as Vienna. Thank you.
Thank you, Anoulak, for that very inspirational talk and taking us on a very, very fast tour on the Mekong. And I love it when you always have to finish with a very charming Vientiane.